Hello and welcome to the Product Opscast with Graham Reed and Antonia Landy. Welcome, Antonia. How are you this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you, Graham.
Today we are joined by Malte, Scholz, co-founder and CPO at AirFocus. Malte, it's great to have you on the show this morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for the invite. It's great being here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Malte, do you want to give us a quick intro to yourself, your background and whatnot?
Yeah. I'm a product guy, but I only had one product job because in that job I got very frustrated. The company, I'm not going to name the name, but it had a great culture, but it was a bit messy in terms of how to do product management, etc. And back then, this was 8 years ago or 9 years ago, I was looking for product tooling to better help us moderate, navigate the road mapping and prioritization processes. And I tried every tool that was available back then, and they all didn't work. And I always landed back in my messy spreadsheet and the chaotic Jira setup, and I was very frustrated. And that was the point when I decided to build first a weekend project type of version of AirFocus with my co-founder Christian. And then you know how life goes. Sometimes we didn't really have an idea to create a company, but like one thing followed the other. And 8 years later, we had actually built a leading product management system. We have like hundreds of large enterprise customers that are using AirFocus as a single source of record for all things product management and road mapping. And in the beginning of this year, we actually exited the company to Lucid. You probably all know Lucid Chart, Lucid Spark, an amazing product, an amazing company, to be honest. And I'm not getting paid to say that. Well, I'm getting paid. They pay me as well. But we are now in this like journey of integrating both companies while keeping AirFocus a separate standalone brand, because we're still like selling to people who need a product management system. But essentially, we're both working on this larger mission of accelerating work through a system of record for product, but also like all the visual tools that come with the amazing Lucid suite for visual activities, visual collaboration, both on the strategic level, but also on the lower team level, where you maybe want to break out for a visual activity, for like a discovery or a retro, all that stuff, right? Where HR teams have to do their thing on some visual whiteboard integrated with the rest of the work. Sorry for the long intro.
No, it's great. I mean, no, look, firstly, I'd love to just say congratulations. I've not actually said that to you since I saw the news. Of the exit. So certainly congratulations to you and to Christian as well. Absolutely great news. And I've followed you for a long time, actually. We've actually been connected for quite a long time, not necessarily back and forth too much, but, I've always sort of seen that about you in kind of your posts on LinkedIn, and I've seen you speak. You have that passion for, filling that gap where, something isn't, already out there. You mentioned earlier about kind of like the messy Excels, the messy Jiras and things like that, and filling that gap with something that, because it isn't there, and you've gone out and you've done that, and actually hats off to you for that.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for the congratulations. And the more I think about it, I really am a product ops person, because I think product ops people, they also they like to have stuff cleaned up, or at least like some visibility into some structure. And they also probably in many cases like tools. They like to make good decisions. Like all of that stuff is like deeply in my DNA. It drives me crazy when there's inefficiency, or when bad or stupid decisions could be avoided. Like sometimes you have to make stupid decisions, but like if they can be avoided, that hurts.
Yeah, I've always thought of you as an honorary product ops person, Malte, for sure, in the many conversations we've had. I think the frustrations you felt when starting AirFocus are the frustrations that most of us product ops people felt before they realized this can be a full-time job. So it's always felt very, very close, for sure.
Moving on to the reason why we asked you onto the podcast today is we'd love to really kind of hear about your experiences with organizations that are kind of not necessarily a kind of really digital native. We are, I think Antonio and I are very used to working with very tech heavy companies that where actually product ops is going in, and it's a natural evolution for them in they're already on their digital journey. But I think you've worked kind of a lot with organizations where that's not the case. where they're not necessarily a digital first, they're not necessarily kind of really ingrained in kind of being a digital organization, but need to go through a digital transformation. And really, that's very quite, it's unique, I think, in our world a little bit, and certainly unusual. And I think our viewers, myself and Antonio, absolutely would love to just hear more a little bit about that and some experiences you've had there.
Yeah, maybe to provide some context. So the majority of companies, they're actually not these modern tech companies that have everything figured out yet. The majority of companies are like hardware companies, insurances, banks, all of that stuff, right? And they don't come with this like digital first mindset, but they're like have understood that they have to change the way they think, the way they work. Otherwise, they're gonna get eaten by more digital native companies. Yeah. So I think this is the global trend. Another trend is that from the way they work, they come from a very project mindset. Yeah. Which also makes sense, right? Because this was the tool of the, I don't know, last 50 years. And they're now in this process of adapting a product mindset because they understood that project management and getting stuff done alone doesn't cut it. You need to also solve the right problems. Ideally, you also talk to customers and you have an idea about the P&L and like what the work you're doing is actually doing to your business. Data, all of the stuff. So they realize this, but this is like a long journey typically for these companies, and product ops is not always where they start. Maybe they should, but like it starts with hiring the right leaders, hiring product people, actual product people, training some of the project managers to become product managers. Sometimes they go the PO route first, something like that. And a lot of learnings, a lot of failures. And I have like a lot of empathy after 8 years of doing this with these companies, right? Like, and I really don't like coming around with the product management playbook and then hitting the playbook against the head of everyone. Hey, you're doing it wrong. I just like understand, okay, what are your top 3 problems? Let's try to get a rough understanding of the context, because the context is what really matters here. And then just like take one step after the other, ideally in the right direction. But sometimes these teams just need to update their timeline-based roadmaps. And then who am I to judge without all the context telling them, hey, you can never use a timeline roadmap and never put a date on a feature that you've planned to release? Like, who am I to judge and tell them what's right or wrong? The important thing is that you understand why you're making certain decisions, and that you have some understanding of the broader picture, and that you're like constantly trying to learn and educate yourself and think about like moving in stages, right? Like, and that's what we see a lot. And it's always like this balance, right? We're constantly dancing this dance of let's try to bring in the playbook. Let's try to do the right things that we all know after having read like all the books, knowing all the things that work, but at the same time, just like listening, taking the baby steps with them, doing some hand holding while showing them how to do their own version of product management and establishing their own product management single source of record, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's such an important point you made, that during that transformation, you are a lot of the time, and for a long time, usually in that middle bit where it's uncomfortable. There is a new way of working that is very much not related to the old way of working. And certain teams have adapted to it, other teams haven't yet, right? And this idea of sometimes you just need a timeline roadmap, and having the pragmatism to be able to provide that in that moment with the knowledge that this is the current state. That's not necessarily where we want to stay. The future state will look different, but while that transformation happens, we still need to keep the business going. And I think especially when we talk about larger scale transformations in sort of more traditional organizations, changing the mindset of the product people or the product organization that now exists is one thing. But then changing the mindset of all of the auxiliary teams who have much less stake in it and who still need to get their work done and who are still important stakeholders is a wholly different battle.
Yes. Probably also too big for product ops to even like control or...
Right.
It was it's funny. I was talking to was talking to a lady yesterday, Amanda McGregor. Hi, Amanda, if you're watching. She was talking about kind of product ops in general, having a bit of a chat. One of the things that she said, which was so true, is that it's that uncomfortable part, that uncomfortable middle, that is the hardest part of change management as a whole. Whether you're doing product ops, you're doing project management, you're doing change management in business, whether you're in digital or not, it's always that uncomfortable middle. It's that part that is you when you're in constant fluctuating change, and nobody, not yourself, that's leading that charge, not the people that are the most resistant, not even the people that are least resistant, the leaders watching from on top. It's always that really uncomfortable section that is so difficult to navigate. And it's not just, Antonio, you and I both know we live this day in and day out. It's not just that that part about getting people to change from a product perspective, or them, even going through that change from a product perspective. It's much more basic than that. It's then changing their habits.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter whether it's in product or whether it's in the kind of other business areas, or it's whether they need to, I don't know, businesses are suddenly making them come into work, into the office more, back to the office, things like that. That is a very uncomfortable piece, that whole change. And it's not an easy area to navigate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we need to remember as well, and this is something that you pointed out, Malte, in the beginning, right? This idea of, no, this is the product playbook. This is what we must be doing, like steamrolling, bulldozing everybody day one. And I think as a young PM, I definitely did that. Like I worked at companies. Yeah. And it's almost a rite of passage, right? I worked at companies that were working suboptimally, not like speaking to customers. It wasn't exactly the top thing we were going to do. Somebody at the top just mandated some sort of feature that just needed to get done. And I was like fighting and struggling like hell, going like, no, we're doing it all wrong. And it's like, literally, you've been at this company for 2 months. You've been in this job for like 2-3 years. Like, why do you think anybody's going to be listening to you? But the thing is, like, that's not going to work, right? And I think that's what we need to forget. Like, there is so much dogmatism in places like LinkedIn or on conferences, or if you're not this, then you're not the product manager. And if you don't do XYZ, then you shouldn't be in this job. And for a lot of us, that is just not the reality. There is a transition period. And absolutely, we all want to aspire to making best practices work. But I think what we need to remember is that they need to work for the company. They don't need to work for the sake of the best practice.
Yeah. And I fully agree with both of these statements, but I think you really want to be pragmatic and empathetic and like taking these baby steps, and also sometimes not working by the playbook. But where you don't want to make compromises, from my view, is on the sense of urgency and the willingness to change, right? Because this is really, I've seen companies where this then actually leads to disaster. So this is also a little bit of a topic that is maybe out of your hands or the product ops hands, right? This is where the strong leaders come in, but you really need that sense of urgency and hey, we need to move fast now, because otherwise these companies, they will get hit very hard. And if you really zoom out, also think about the European continent, and I'm would include the UK into this. But I think there needs to be this sense of urgency, because there are huge problems that are coming our way.
Yeah.
I think there's and just to kind of round out this point a little bit of what we just said there, I absolutely loved that, we shouldn't be compromising on that sense of urgency, that desire for change. I think that is absolutely critical. I talk a lot, Antonio gets bored of me talking about this, about, how it is important to have that support for that change. And that is something that is quite often out of product ops is hands directly, is having that support from on top, saying, no, we are going to change, we are pushing forward, we're not going to just kind of sit here and stagnate. But a piece I'd really just love to find to finish out on this point is, I think we have to be comfortable, not just us, but everybody. When we are in this transition, we have to get comfortable that we are going to be uncomfortable for a period of time. Now, there's obviously the scale of that being uncomfortable is absolutely there, for toning down. But it's never an easy. Change is never easy, regardless of how much you pad it, how empathetic you are, and those are all right things to say. But, and kind of to the audience, I think, particularly if you're in product ops, this is an uncomfortable journey. And you kind of have to be a little bit comfortable with the fact that that journey is going to be uncomfortable and it will get better. And I think for leaders as well, it'll also be uncomfortable for you and for your teams. But that is part of the journey as well. And that's, I'm going to have that tattooed somewhere, I think. Be comfortable that it's going to be uncomfortable. So, no, really interesting.
Any things you've seen work in making these members and these teams and these organizations get comfortable with being uncomfortable for a time?
I think keeping them informed, bringing them on the journey, making sure that they not only feel part of the journey, but they are part of that journey as well. I think being, open with that as well, saying that, look, this isn't an easy thing. I think naturally most people are naturally empathetic towards others when it is a difficult job to do. Most people want to help, want to be supportive in various different degrees. So I think just keeping them informed, keeping them on journey, showing them where we're going to get to, what the progress we've made is, being honest that some of these changes not going to be the easiest thing. It's going to be a big change, but you've got that support there to kind of help you along. I think for me, that's the way that I've always approached it, and like to think where I've kind of been successful in that respect. Antonio, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, so when I work with more traditional organizations, they also tend to be fairly political, right? So I think something I focus on is really helping the product teams continue to keep the commitments to other teams, right? I think OKRs are a classic example of that. When we introduce OKRs and people are just like, okay, I'm going to write down an OKR for every single thing that's on my plate because I need a stakeholder XYZ to know that I have listened to them. I need to show my leader how much I'm doing so that I get that promotion and so on. So I think it's important to also understand how the team shows up and be very, very particular in saying we are reducing scope because we are increasing focus, for example, right? And it's really guiding other teams along that journey and saying, well, actually, you can't just come to us with features anymore, but we would love to collaborate on the problem, right? So it's finding ways to enact that change while making sure that the rest of the organization still works and you don't become a liability as a new products team.
Interesting. Do you think it's one of the jobs of product ops to actually almost coach the product leaders to be vulnerable and take people on this journey? I mean, this could be a lot to ask from product ops, maybe on top of all the other things they have on their desk.
I think it depends on the product ops person and whether they are able and willing to do that. I personally love to do it, but I've myself have been in product a long time, right? And the funny, like when Graham and I started in product ops, it was very much an alternative path to product leadership, right? And then people started getting into product ops as a path into product. Obviously, a person like that wouldn't be able to be that strong partner to a product leader or a CPO. But I think if you do have the know-how, I think even just offering feedback, right? Offering that alternative view, that holistic view of this is what's going on in your organization can be really powerful.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Because I'm the same. I would certainly, for better or worse, I give feedback regardless to my bosses most of the time. So I think it is a key. I think it can be a key thing. I think Antonio's absolutely right. We would never go to every product ops person that's watching or we'd speak to that says, you must go and tell your product leaders X, Y, and Z. Because that's a difficult ask for anybody. We got it depending on your personality, your experience. But I think there's a side of this that looks at product leaders and say, actually, what you should solicit that feedback from product ops. They will have a lens on your division, on your teams that probably you don't even see. Product teams tend to be so hyper focused on what we're physically building, what we're delivering, the stats around how well we're delivering it, and not necessarily see the ancillary stuff that goes around that supports the the delivery of all of that stuff. And so I think it is important to solicit that feedback, and I think product ops should try to be comfortable in giving that feedback. But it's a two-way street. If your product leader is just not somebody that's open to that sort of thing, and then trying to force that issue is going to be very, very difficult for you, unless you are just super, super happy to just go at it. And so I don't think it's necessarily straightforward.
But Malte, I'm interested. So you've, through Airfocus, you've seen a lot of traditional companies trying to adapt to the product ways of working, implementing best practices. In your opinion, what differentiates a good leader in that kind of context with a bad leader that maybe doesn't feel that sense of urgency?
It's a good question. Well, I'm also just scratching the surface when I work with these customers. And I also don't have like a 10, 15 year enterprise product career. So whatever I say is with limited context, I would say. But I think there are plenty of examples of good product leadership. It's pretty much what Graham, you said, right? Like just like being honest, transparent, make it transparent how you think about the world and the context and what led you to certain decisions. And Lucid is actually doing an excellent job at this. And it actually starts right at the top with the CEO, Dave Grohl. And then it trickles down to all the other leaders. They're tremendously good at providing context and then like showing you, hey, this is how we understand the world. And then this is like what we learned from it. And these are the 3 options that we have right now. And this would option number 3 is like our recommended path going forward. You have until tomorrow to give feedback and I don't know, speak against option 3. Otherwise, we're just going to move fast on option 3. And this alone is very powerful because it makes you feel as a person in their teams, as if you're part of the game and as if you're actually part of the journey. And this is a little bit like the best practice. What we see a lot in reality is the data versus hippo gap. Yeah. So 92% of the teams still let the loudest voice in the room drive decisions. And in a way, in the absence of product ops, there is no anti-hippo function, and it's really, really dangerous. So in my world, product ops doesn't play a huge role. Maybe I would say like the dedicated role, the dedicated function in these organizations, someone is doing this. Otherwise, they wouldn't implement Airfocus, right? Because Airfocus is part of the product ops journey or playbook. Yeah, like to have a product tool that acts as a single source of record where team roadmaps are somewhat aligned and linked to like strategic roadmaps and OKRs and customer feedback and the team workflows, all of that. Someone is doing that job, but very often they're not trained product ops people. They're not called that. Sometimes they're doing that on the side, but these champions that think about this kind of stuff, they exist in all the companies, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. A super important point. And I think, so just to round off the leadership topic, I think something that I would love for leaders to be a little bit more aware of is that oftentimes the difference between a bad leader and a good leader is not even in the things you do, is in the amount of communication with your team, right? Like we did this playbook together about, how product ops is perceived and what product teams typically struggle with. And that stat you just pointed out, right? Like the loudest voice still wins. Or like, I remember it was like a vast majority of teams don't use data to make their decision. It is, top down is somebody else's opinion that essentially drives the product roadmap. And I actually don't think it is because all of these companies have bad leaders. I think leaders are not very good at showing their thinking, right? They're not it's exactly what you mentioned, right? They're not very good at saying, this is the context I have. This is how I see the world. And this stuff was all input. And this is the decision we have made and the path we are going forward. And oftentimes the modus operandi underneath that is the same. It's just how you convey that information to your team and to what extent you make them a part of that.
100%. And if you come back to my example, right, like a person that gets presented in a transparent way, like the options for like why certain strategic decisions are made. They are a person that gets presented these options and the context. They would probably not, in a survey with Air Focus, say like the hippo is making the decisions, right?
Right.
No, we are making strategic decisions in a smart way here, like no hippos. And it's exactly what you said, right? It's communication style. It's like, yeah, sometimes it's probably the best leaders. This is maybe a bit of a hot take or like something that I'm just like, they're like tremendously top down, but they're just good at explaining stuff so other people think
Right.
it's them or something like that.
I love that.
Interesting. It's very interesting. I'm quite happy to share. Helios, where I am at the moment, we're probably not the best. I think that is an area that we know that we work on. In that cascading that information down from the top. And it's actually so funny enough, it's something that we're really working on right now, which is kind of changing how we're doing kind of planning, how we're doing kind of strategic thinking and planning, et cetera, to be kind of more two-way, to have those strategic decisions coming down from the top at a very high level. But then, what are we going to do to meet that? Now, that's typical, that's okay, our strategy 101, but certainly something that we are trying to adopt, something new for us. I think we recognize, and I think that's also a key part of this as well, is some self-reflection there to kind of go, yeah, we know that this is an area we're not good at. This is an area that we could do better at. And so it's really interesting to kind of hearing your opinions. Do we have hippos? Yes, we probably do. But I will admit, I'm not close enough to myself how those decisions come about. I do know that, it's not one individual. It's absolutely a group of them that are feeding all of that information in, even though potentially from the outside of that group, and if you didn't know, looking down, it would seem like, yeah, well, they're just making the decisions arbitrarily. And I think that's coming back to exactly what you said. I don't think necessarily it is always those hippos. It's just one person or that group of people. It's just explaining how we've arrived at that. And kind of that absolutely echoes across everything that we do much more insular within product. We don't make those decisions, or we shouldn't be making those decisions arbitrarily. We do look at the data. We do look at customer feedback and research, et cetera, et cetera. But what is key is showing our working out, showing how we've arrived at that, showing the fact that we have validated all of this to others that haven't gone through that journey as well. Because otherwise, if you don't do that, you don't necessarily gain the trust of others, in terms of those decisions that you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. Malte, I wanted to ask you this, but Air Focus obviously being a tool is something that I think lots of product ops folks are familiar with. And tooling implementation is always difficult. I think especially when it is a tool like Air Focus that has the potential to encompass your entire product lifecycle, essentially. How can tooling implementation be used for transformation? Like, how can we use tools as almost like a catalyst?
Yeah. Well, I would agree with the fact that tooling can be really challenging, implementing new tools. But with Air Focus, it's actually as easy as it gets, because just like some context, Air Focus is the only hyper flexible modular product management system, right? Like in layman's terms, we're a little bit like Notion for product management, like really, really flexible and easy to use. And why that is important? It's important because you don't need to implement the entire product management operating system at day one. You can start with your biggest problem or your biggest challenge. And in many cases, it's that roadmaps are being put together on spreadsheets and in PowerPoints over and over again, right? It's just like very cumbersome and time consuming and error prone. And our customers start by doing that job then as the first step in Air Focus. Very simple, right? You have like your Jira epics, you automatically pull them in, two-way sync, everything is integrated. And then you start step by step implementing the product management workflow before stuff goes to Jira, right? And that is something you would do anyways in a way more inefficient way in spreadsheets and PowerPoints. And when you then start by having this like single source of record, so you have this product opportunity that maybe has like a parent initiative or something like that, very simple setup, yeah? But then you start working on this like one item in the database. Yeah, you have the one product opportunity and not 15 different versions on different spreadsheets in PowerPoint. and you will get like benefits very fast because people start like commenting on that one opportunity. They start tracking insights on that one opportunity. They start referencing out to other artifacts. It actually doesn't take a whole lot of work to get started with the first step. And then over time, quarter by quarter, you start implementing more use cases. For example, like adding the insight and customer feedback component to it. Yeah, I now want to centralize my feedback and connect it to my product ops to have like the voice of the customer automatically attached to my product ops. When I say ops, I don't mean like operations. I mean product opportunities. Sorry, like it's probably getting a bit confusing here. But it can be actually very efficiency gaining very fast. So the investment can be low if you're picking the right tool, or if you're just like don't think you have to build the whole house on day one.
Yeah. And I think, and I promise this is not a sales pitch, but I remember when we first looked at the tool together and you walked me through it, and you were like, okay, your company isn't using epics. Don't need to call it an epic. Call it whatever you want. And like, it blew my mind, because I think that is one of the biggest challenges with actually introducing tooling, is that to a certain extent, they tend to dictate how you work. And I think that is an issue that many people are not aware of when picking the new tool, right? It just usually, like when people think about tool adoption, they're just like, oh, okay, we've got this problem. Let's buy a subscription to this tool that solves that problem. Fantastic. Done. Whereas in product ops, we're like, no. Tooling is one way you can go. Okay, great. If tooling really is the right way to go, then you need to think about who is setting up this tool, who is adding the information in, who is making sure it plays nicely with the rest of the tool stack, who makes sure that people have licenses, who makes sure that people get trained on the tool. Like, it is a massive effort to actually introduce new tooling successfully. And on top of that, you then have to deal with the relative rigidity of some of the better known tools in the market that says that genuinely dictate, no, this is the hierarchy, right? This is how everything fits together. And you better start working this way, because otherwise the tool stops making sense.
Yeah, I mean, let's just call a spade, Jira. I mean, we might alienate getting anyone from Atlassian on it in your future, but it's a very interesting point. And I've often thought this about how much the tools themselves, some of those tools, Jira, for example, have actually shaped some product managers' thinking that this is how it's done, that you've got your epics and you've got your tasks, and, the rigidity that Jira offers you. Now, look, Jira is incredibly successful. It is the go-to platform for many organizations, or always used to be. And so as a result of that, you learn that's how it has to happen. You know how the sprints are created. You have to go through this process because of either the limitations or just how it was built in that platform. And so then actually trying to introduce better tools, I sometimes, when I've gone through this myself, that you're up against, well, how does it do epics? How does it do? Because I need to do it this way. And can it do it the same way if we're going to move? Now, hang on a second. You're saying that we have to do, we want a better tool, but we want to do all the same things that Jira is doing, or insert other platform here that you've already got before we even consider moving. And then we want all the advantages that are basically just built on top of that same piece. And it's crazy. And as Antonio's absolutely said, there's so much more that you need to think about on top of that. For me, licensing is my biggest challenge right now. We have, and I've been through this several times in startups as well. We're in a startup mentality still, whereby, look, licensing and paying for licensing is not a big issue because we're all about growth. We'll just get people on it. We'll get people using it. We're not really in control of that. And now all of a sudden we're like, we've got 2,000 licenses for Confluence. Do we need all of those for all of our people? Half our business never use it, but we've done it because it was just easy to do at the time and it really wasn't a big problem. And now we've got to backtrack a little bit and think, actually, now we need to think about this in terms of cost, in terms of access, control, bits and pieces like that. So there's a huge amount that we think about, to be honest with you, not anybody else in the business is really then thinking on.
Yeah. I just want to clarify, like, we are not in the game of replacing Jira. 95% of our customers keep using Jira, and Jira is great for delivery and getting stuff done. Airfocus really sits on top and replaces your spreadsheet and PowerPoint workarounds, and beyond that, like, just helps you to do product management in a better way. But
have a good sales pitch tick there.
Excellent. Yeah, I think The challenge I tend to have with tooling implementations is that for a lot of folks, it seems like a quick fix, right? Whereas a lot of the time, it really is anything but. I think then in many cases, you also need to look to who is actually implementing the tool internally and whether they actually have the mandate, make ways of working decisions or recommendations based on what the tooling now allows. And I think that's one of the things that we tend to. Tooling and change are intertwined. They are essentially the same thing. You cannot introduce a new tool without introducing change. And I think as a product ops person, I'm so careful to introduce new tooling because I'm not looking at the cost of the tool. I am looking at the cost of the tool and the cost of the change that the tooling will inevitably bring with it.
And the distraction.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Product ops often finds itself sitting on the fence between looking at product and, by extension, the technology side of the business, and also looking at the wider business as well. Yes, with the product tech lens on it, but certainly, how does sales, marketing, support, delivery, how do they interact with what we're doing? And so actually, another element to what Antonio's just said there is also thinking about how is the rest of the business going to interact with this tool? What's the wider impact on the business if we buy this tool? I'm personally a big lover of Airtable. I've done a huge amount of stuff with Airtable just recently over the past year. We're in the process of now looking at building a business-wide planning tool based upon some of the work that I've already done, but essentially extending it out across the entire business. Now, that's not only is it a big undertaking, but it's a big consideration to say, is Airtable actually still the right tool for us if we're going to do this? It's worked very well so far, but I'm now going through an evaluation perhaps to say, is this going to be right long-term for the entire business? How does the rest of the business need to use this? I've kind of been co-opted to do this. It wouldn't traditionally be product ops just because I've done enough with it, but it is that wider consideration. And so we have to look out, we have to then start investigating other teams' needs and uses, what support maybe their teams have in terms of training and using that, or is it all going to fall back onto product ops as well? So I think there's lots and lots of considerations with tooling that most people don't initially think about. I think Antonio is absolutely right. It's not just about, look at all these fancy features that we get. What's the cost of implementing this tool from a license perspective? So everything about the usage that is much longer term.
Yeah. I think something to remember is as well, like product management does not exist in a vacuum. Product is business. Like if you've done your transformation successfully, your product work is business work. It is what will bring the money in. It is what will make your organization more successful. And then you really have to think about, exactly as you say, Graham, how do we interact with all of the other teams that are now in a product organization, in a product company, right? Because we cannot be this teeny tiny little island that does agile over here and everybody else is still in spreadsheets. Everybody else has no access to our ways of working or does not even understand how we make better decisions.
Yeah. I want to say, it's a really interesting question, and I'm thinking about this for 8 years now, right? This build yourself versus buy an expert tool, and this whole conversation is also changing with AI, right? Because we all now start to believe that with these AI tools, we can actually get rid of all the tools. No need for HubSpot, no need for Salesforce, no need for Workday. We just build all these systems ourselves. And I'm a little bit on the...
Please God, when we can get rid of Workday. It's a hateful product.
Yeah. And I'm a little bit more on the conservative side here, that I actually don't think all companies should build their own software, because there's a lot that you don't see at the surface when you use a tool that goes into building great software. And it's in like easy words, it's easy to build shitty or mediocre software with AI right now. But in order to build like really great user experiences, you need a lot of expert knowledge, and you will keep needing great product designers and great product managers and all of that. I'm a kind of put tools together plumber type of person, right? Like it fully resonates with me to start building stuff with Airtable. But I think there are like physical limits with how much you can scale these tools. I have not seen a company build their own product management systems for hundreds of teams. If I understood correctly, even like beyond the product use case, I haven't seen that. I have seen some cases where companies tried and then went back to a dedicated tool. So, but maybe AI changes the whole landscape. I wouldn't be totally shocked. Right?
It's a very interesting point, and it kind of leads on to something a little bit. Is there tends to be kind of two schools of thought when it comes to tooling. Whether it's looking at a handful of tools and going, how can we get the maximum value out of all the features, etc., etc. And then there's the other, which is, look, do you know what? We'll go and buy this tool because it solves this problem really, really well. But do you know what? Then we've got to go and buy half a dozen tools, 20 tools, 50 tools to do everything that we want to do. And we hope we can interconnect them together. What's been your experience, Malte, with this? From the businesses that you've worked with, have they kind of gone, no, we're going to go fully in on AirFocus and or some other tools that they've got, or have they kind of been, no, we want AirFocus just for this part of the journey, and then we'll worry about the other bits and pieces with other providers?
Yeah, I love the question. I think I'm more in the camp of having rather fewer tools, and rather make them do more, because otherwise you're going to be busy like integrating tools and dealing with all the problems that come with that. And to your point, Antonio, right? Like tools should not be not be its own goals. Yeah, you have a business need to and customer need to satisfy, and that should be your primary use case. And then I think as a general business principle, like less is more, less process, less people, sometimes less middle management, mostly less is better. And then that probably also means like you want to have a product tool, and I'm speaking my own book, right? You want to have a tool for the very important problem space and the product strategy, and like bringing all of that together and aligning all these teams with their own interests. I think that is a use case that deserves its own tool, the same way you need a CRM or a Workday replacement. And you need a Slack, something like that, right? There are these key categories, but then I would try to really maximize these tools in what they're doing.
Yeah, excellent. I think we're coming up at time, more or less, but I did have one more question I wanted to ask you, Malte. If there is a product leader or soon to be product leader in a traditional company thinking about going all in on becoming more product led, what's your advice to them?
It's a good question. I think you need more than ever entrepreneurial thinking, just like this pragmatism and this ability to endure tough times and see the long-term vision, and with a strong sense of urgency, try to get there. And I think this can be also very motivating for that person, but also the entire organization. If you take people on a journey with like this broader, this is why we're doing this kind of mission. I think this is and will probably forever be one of the most valuable things you can do as a product leader. And I don't see a reason why you cannot do that for any industry, any product. I think there's always a broader mission, and if it's not, then I would probably change companies. But I mean, unless you're in the adult gambling, whatever, like there's usually some value of what you're doing, right? And you can. I love people that are obsessed with the value they create. It's just like beautiful, and they should make that much bigger and much more part of the broader stories. And they need to be like great storytellers that learn how to bring the people on the journey.
I love that. Yeah. And honestly, like as a reminder to everybody, most of these traditional companies are deeply embedded into our everyday life and work, right? Like these are people that do stuff that is so meaningful to our lives. It's not just another fitness app or whatever it is. Like this is your bank. This is your healthcare provider, right? These are things that are deeply important to all of our lives. So 100%. I really love that.
100%.
What an absolutely fab way to end. Really, really great ending statement there. That's it for today, everybody. I'd certainly like to thank our special guest, Malte Scholz, for everything that you've shared today. We'll put a little... In fact, there's two little banners we'll put on about now. Firstly, is obviously to AirFocus. You can go and find out about that. But also, we'll put a link to the playbook that you both wrote together, which we didn't actually really talk about today. Kind of only mentioned very briefly. So we'll put a little link of that about here or something like that on the screen. Thank you very much. Really, really great to hear from you today. Thank you to everybody watching as well. Antonio and I will be back for the next episode. In fact, we're recording one later on today as well. So we'll be back, and you can look forward to that. And thank you for joining us today. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. This was fun.